Good morning. Thank you all so much for being here and really excited to kick off this panel. So my name is Melina. I cover agriculture and climate change for the Associated Press. And I'm really excited to talk to our panelists today about regenerative agriculture. So do y'all want to introduce yourselves and tell us a little bit about who you are and what you do? Do you want to start, Violet?
Wonderful, sure. Hello, everyone. My name is Violet Grgich. I'm second generation. My father immigrated to Napa Valley and was the winemaker that won the Paris Tasting of 1976, putting Napa Valley wines on the map. I'm president and CEO and very, very excited to be following in his dream of every day doing your best, learning something new, and making a friend.
Hi everyone, my name is Brooke Hansen. On a personal note, I grew up on a corn and soybean farm in the southeast corner of North Dakota, so excited and humbled that I get to remain in a space that is so near and dear to me and my family. My role is I am with Cargill and I lead our sustainability efforts that are farmer facing here in North America. And I'll spend just a little bit of time providing some context on Cargill for those of you that aren't aware, just to give you some insight in terms of the type of perspective that I'll bring today. So Cargill is an agribusiness company. We are 150 years old, family owned, headquartered in Minneapolis, Minnesota, although we did get our start right here in the state of Iowa with a single grain facility. At our core, Cargill sits at the center and the intersection of our farmers as well as the end of the supply chain with food companies and consumers. And so we work with farmers to set up solutions for them, purchase grain from them, buy or move and transport that grain across the globe. But we also process that grain further to equip food companies and feed companies with ingredients that they ultimately then sell to end consumers. So a bit about Cargill and a little bit about the perspective that I'll be able to bring today.
Good morning. Alexey Rostapshov with John Deere. I lead our digital business and sustainability solutions initiatives, and I think most are aware of John Deere and us being an ag equipment company, but part of that story that I think you'll hear today from me is equipment and technology go hand in hand, and as we've invested in technology really over the decades and over centuries, that will come up as a theme, I think, quite a bit today, so looking forward to the discussion.
Thank you all so much. So just to introduce this topic a little bit, I was asked to provide a definition of regenerative agriculture, and I think, as probably a lot of you know, there really isn't one single clear-cut definition. Most of the definitions I've seen in my reporting and my colleagues' reporting focus on it as being a way of farming more holistically. So thinking about soil health, water quality, also thinking about greenhouse gas emissions that contribute to climate change. So that could look like farming cattle differently, moving them to graze on grasses that sequester carbon, thinking about no-till methods or cover crops. So I'm going to ask all of you in a minute how you define regenerative agriculture, but I also do just want to point out that because this is not one size fits all, and there are so many different differences in these methods, whether it's growing grapes for wine or raising cattle. So there are critics who say that there's more research needed, right, to see if some of these methods really are doing what they say they're doing. There's questions about are certifications needed for these regenerative practices, but we also know that a lot of farmers really care about their land and they want to leave it better than how they found it. So yeah, my first question for all of you is, how do you define regenerative agriculture?
We started farming organically in 2000 as a primary result becoming a state-grown, that my father believed that you can only make great wine if you have the best grapes. You can only have the best grapes if you farm them naturally and you have complete control. We moved to biodynamic farming in 2003 and then found that that was not taking care of all of our needs and discovered regenerative organic starting around 2018 or so. And the way we have defined it is not about sustaining what's already not working very well, but about creating life and creating living soils that actually do regenerate. So we talk about regeneration. A starfish can regenerate an arm. You can actually bring your soil back to life again. And again, the extreme water retention, not just minimal, but extreme water retention, sequestering carbon. We have found that it actually works. We have hired somebody who, with a degree in microbiology as a winemaker, actually is a regenerative organic research manager, so that we're able to take all the things that we're learning and share them with others to encourage them to do that. No tilling is key, allowing microbes to flourish. And also, it is actually a #1 way to promote climate, to combat climate change by sequestering carbon. We're actually carbon negative, not carbon neutral, carbon negative right now. And we've done it in a very short period of time and are happy to share everything that we do. We're also more profitable, not just in the long term, not having to replant, but also in the short term as well.
Thank you so much. Definitely going to ask you about profitability later too, so go ahead, Brooke.
Yeah, I think Melina and Violet, you hit the nail on the head. There's so many different variations of a definition of regenerative agriculture out there, but you are starting to see some draft frameworks be developed by a number of different organizations. And I would say at their core, all of them have the consistent theme of agricultural practices that do as little as possible to disrupt our soil. That's how Cargill, I think, also defines regenerative agriculture, but while we look to partner with farmers in terms of setting those practices up, we're also really focused on the outcomes that those regenerative agricultural practices provide, whether it is positive environmental outcomes, right? Less disruption in the soil means less carbon that is emitted into the atmosphere, reduction of greenhouse gases emissions. In addition, and Violet touched on this as well, improving farmer livelihood, whether it's profitability, less reliance on resources like fertilizer or being able to reduce your water usage, et cetera. And then third, and I think what is really central to some of the conversations that we've been having over the course of this amazing conference and gathering, is really about resilient and healthy soils. That resiliency to stand up to extreme weather patterns, and healthy soils that allow our crops to flourish and ultimately create a more food secure world as well. And so I think that foundational definition is generally adopted and accepted across industry, at least in terms of the conversation I've been a part of. But I think equally important to that definition is the outcomes that we're trying to pursue with implementation of those regenerative agricultural practices.
It's always tough to go last with
Right.
Such great points. And I think that does speak to, while there may be differences geographically by cropping system, the fundamental principles, I would say, are really the same across the globe, frankly. So from a regenerative perspective, what does that mean? It's things that you can do to increase your productivity, increase your resilience, and maintain or increase your profitability. And it's great to have a grower on the panel to especially point to that last one, because at the end of the day, there isn't really a conversation about evolving practices or bringing new equipment or technology to a farm if there's no farm to go to. And as we think about, from our perspective at John Deere, and again layering in the role of technology, our philosophy really for quite a while at this point, for decades, has been, how do we help growers do more with less? And so as we think about precision ag technologies that help you optimize your fertilizer use, help you optimize your herbicide use, make sure that every seed has the highest chance during planting of germinating, that all feeds into that in support of those fundamental principles.
Great, thank you all so much. So the next question is kind of about, how do you get farmers to do that, right? And I know this is supposed to be for all of you, but I also want to be mindful of time. Sure. So I guess if any of you have really strong feelings about what is the key to helping farmers successfully adopt a new regenerative practice. And actually, maybe Violet, if you can start with your personal experience, what was kind of the thing that pushed you over the edge to say, yeah, we should change something, we should do something?
Well, we started very slowly. We started organic farming, then I mentioned biodynamic farming, and there were some specific preparations in biodynamic farming that actually caused mildew in our grapes, which is a really big deal. It's extremely expensive. A lot of hand washing of grapes to get that off. And my cousin Ivo Yeramas really spearheaded all of this farming for us. He has a degree in mechanical engineering and was absolutely blown away by Nicolas Joly speaking about biodynamics and natural processes. So the key for regenerative is natural processes and allowing nature to do all the hard work. Basically, microbes are like little chefs in the soil, and they're, breaking down organic matter and feeding the plants. But we literally have seen results that have changed our neighbors. We have seen in terms of smoke taint, people probably remember in 2017 and 2020, some wineries were very vocal about how they were protecting the consumer by not picking grapes and making wine in 2020. We had absolutely no smoke taint. Our grapes were completely protected from that, both in 2017 and in 2020. And I'm very pleased to say that one of our 2020 Cabernets actually got the same score as Harlan did at $1,900 a bottle. So by having our neighbors who also make extremely expensive wines literally see what we're doing, I can get into this more now or later. It's up to you.
I do want to talk to you more about this, but
Okay.
I'm just curious from your perspectives, Brooke and Alexey, like working with farmers, and I'm curious if maybe that reflects some of the conversations that you just described, seeing mildew or whatever it is.
Neighbors see what you do.
Yeah.
And they're like, oh gosh, I lost most of my grapes and yours are perfectly healthy. Oh my God, what are you doing?
That's such a great example, Violet, and maybe I'll just provide a little bit more perspective from my lens. So Cargill's regenerative agricultural program, we've got a number of them throughout the globe. Our flagship program is actually right here in the US, though. We partner with just under 1,500 farmers across 16 states, and we're across 1 million acres right now, which is really exciting for us. But we have found that supporting farmers along this journey is just so incredibly important. And the two pieces of feedback that we hear from them time and time again is it needs to make sense from my whole farm operation perspective, and it needs to be easy for me. And so transitioning from conventional to regen ag practices, it's not a flip of the switch. There needs to be strong financial incentives for farmers, because there is sometimes where transitioning from conventional to regen, you can take a dip because you might have to invest in additional equipment or just different ways of approaching your whole farm operation. And so providing financial incentives is really important for farmers to make that helpful for them and ease the burden of that transition. In addition, providing general support, like agronomy support, and really sitting down across the kitchen table with farmers and understanding what their goals are, where they're at in their career, what's important to them, and then really helping them make that decision on whether this transition to regenerative agriculture makes sense to them. And a key component of that is often it's just not widely adopted perhaps in the area or the geography in which they're located. Their neighbors aren't doing it. So it comes with a bit of skepticism. But those farmers that do adopt it, we are hearing those same stories, Violet, right? We're hearing from farmers that are like, yep, I implemented cover crop or no-till or low-till a few years ago, and now my neighbor's knocking on my door and saying, hey, how'd you get your field to look so great, right? What are you doing? And then it's creating more buy-in and an understanding of how just valuable and positive regen ag can be, both for farmers' livelihoods as well as helping to create a resilient soil health system.
Thank you so much. I think that's a perfect segue into, it's hard, right? It's not necessarily a flip of the switch. So Alexey, my question for you is, can you talk about some of the challenges you see? And maybe if there's a specific example you can give us where you were talking to a farmer and they described those challenges.
Absolutely, and I think building on Brooke's previous point, so that's actually one of the reasons Cargill and John Deere have a partnership that we're very excited about, is it's about helping the grower overcome those challenges. One of our biggest investments, and it is unique in the industry, is really our focus on supporting the grower. we're talking about new technologies that are only increasing in terms of the pace of change. Growers have to focus on their operation. They need to, again, make sure that that crop is planted, protected, and then successfully harvested. And there's a few ways that we tackle that. One is through a global dealer network, and it is very much intentional that it is meant to be localized, right? There isn't a global mandate of XYZ. The way a grower operates in Brazil versus Canada versus Ethiopia is different. And that's where we really invest in that on-the-ground infrastructure to provide those that support. And a few examples of that is we also have field staff that interact with growers and help them understand the benefits of these new technologies. On paper, it looks great. It makes sense. Our See and Spray technology, which is a spot spray technology for herbicides, saves 60% in terms of chemicals applied. Our new solution for in-furrow fertilizer reduces 60% the amount of fertilizer you need up front. But the growers need to understand, what does that mean for my operation? What are the knock-on effects of this system? And so, again, very geographically specific. In Ethiopia, that means working with industry partners and USAID on setting up public-private partnerships for mechanization hubs to increase training and help growers understand what mechanization looks like. So it really depends on the geography. And the second thing I would add as well, one of the biggest challenges, right, we've touched on it, is economics, right? Mm-hmm. And there's been a number of steps we've been taking to make these technologies more accessible to growers. First is, in terms of connectivity, for example, costs of our connectivity solution have dropped 75% in the last few years. It's now coming in base in a lot of pieces of equipment. So again, like most technologies, you're able to, as the technology progresses, have economies of scale and provide it more efficiently. And we've also adjusted our business models to reflect the reality of the grower. So you can now upgrade equipment rather than buying new equipment as new technology comes online at a much lower cost. That really changes the economics for the grower.
Thank you so much. I think this is probably a really good time to ask you, Violet, about profitability. And you talked about that, seeing that improve. But I wonder if there was a moment where you kind of went, "Oh my God, what am I doing?" And kind of how you got through that, or if there were challenges along the way.
There's always challenges. Mother Nature is Mother Nature. But I think because we went into it fairly gradually through a long process, starting in 2000. I think the real aha moment for my cousin was we were doing it because it was the right thing to do. And then he's very much a numbers guy. He's like doing the analysis. He's like, I keep going over and over again. We're actually it's not costing us as much. And quite literally, so we get information from our accountants. The average cost to farm Napa Valley acre is $15,000 a year. It costs us about $11,000. So that's $4,000 less per acre. We farm 366 acres. That's tiny compared to a lot of farms, but it's a lot for us. That adds up. We also find that we're producing more. We're producing anywhere from half a ton to 1 ton more an acre than average Napa Valley. And a lot of the evidence that we're seeing is pretty amazing. So I talked about smoke earlier. Water retention, that's another thing. Microbes and not tilling the soil creates soil that has structure like a sponge. And it actually absorbs water. We had an atmospheric rainfall in 2021, 8 to 12 inches in one day. And my cousin happened to be in the vineyard, of course, and he captured on video our vineyard, which had no standing water whatsoever. You cannot see a drop. Panning over to our very close by neighbor who tills their soil, their vineyard and the road in between us is completely flooded. So happy to share that video with anybody who asks. We also, our vineyard planted in 1959, old vines produce grapes that are more complex, produce wines that can be more complex, and the cost of replanting is significantly cut down when you don't have to pull them up. The average life of a vine is like a human being. That's 80, 100 years old. Napa Valley, the average lifespan of vine is 15 to 20, 25 years old because of conventional farming. And I mean, if your kid were to suddenly die at the age of 25, or you're like, they're sick, they're over, they're done with, I need another one, that's not normal. So we're also seeing that this vineyard planted in 1959 of 25 acres had red leaf virus. That was initially why we started biodynamic farming. If leaves are red, you cannot, convert as much chlorophyll into sugar, which therefore grapes can't ripen, so people pull their vineyards out. We have had a perfectly healthy vineyard coexisting with that virus. The virus is there, but it does absolutely nothing. We can ripe full ripeness, full maturity, and produce incredibly complex wines. And our neighbor Dominus is always aghast. Another thing too, not tilling the soil. We had 10 days of 115-degree heat in the middle of September several years ago. Most people lost a lot of their grapes. Our next door neighbor, at $600 a bottle, lost most of his grapes because they burned. So my cousin clocked our soil temperature at 85 degrees. It's one thing to have the air be 115, but the soil reflects. Their soil temperature was 175 degrees. And that in itself convinced them to start farming regeneratively. Again, the seeing is believing. And our regenerative organic research manager is documenting all of this. We are happy to share with everyone. In fact, we're on a mission to get as many people, both vineyard owners as well as other industries, to adopt regenerative organic agriculture because we've seen the difference. It actually works, and it is more profitable. So visit a lot of vineyards to show them how to do it, and happy to do more.
Thank you so much. It's great to hear your personal experience and yeah, just to hear it straight from you. I guess, so my next question for Brooke is kind of expanding beyond the individual farmer. Can you talk about the supply chain and how supply chain partners are working together on some of these regenerative practices?
Maybe I'll start with the statement that partnerships are not just critical, they are essential to enable the scaling of regenerative agriculture practices. And so I mentioned earlier that Cargill sits at the intersection of where we're connected at the farm gate with our farm partners all the way to the end consumer. And so we do see it as a key obligation of ours to help make that connection and to enable that farm gate sustainability solutions like Regen Connect to be set up for success. And that takes not just the farmer, it takes us, and it takes our food companies that we partner with as well. And it also takes partners like John Deere that I know Alexey and I will talk a little bit more about in terms of what that partnership looks like. But at the core of those partnerships need to be aligned goals around keeping your programs farmer-centric. And so we've seen some really exciting partnerships with our food customers where they are willing to invest in these farm gate solutions like Regen Connect with us. And it helps not only them meet their own climate goals, but it also is part of where they want to go philanthropically as well. And it also, again, helps them from a business perspective because it creates a more food secure supply chain, which is so critical for their success as well. So it makes business sense and it's aligned with their goals from a climate perspective as well. And so one of the stories that I love to tell is this connection point between the farmers and our food companies. We oftentimes will hold field days in partnership with our farmers, and where we'll go to visit a field, fields enrolled in Regen Connect with a farm partner of ours, and we'll bring our food customers to the farm, and they can see the benefits. Everything that Violet just highlighted, they can see the benefits and see regenerative agriculture in practice. And that education, that understanding, that acknowledgement, I think has just really paid dividends for even stronger partnerships within the beginning of the supply chain all the way to the end of the supply chain.
Thank you so much. Violet, I want to ask if you can explain briefly about your certification, kind of how that process worked, just to kick off, because I have a couple questions about, kind of standardizing this and whether there should be certifications and whether that would be more appealing to some farmers who are thinking about making the leap. So can you start by talking about your certification?
Absolutely. I'll start by saying when we started farming organically, we were not interested in pursuing certification because we thought, why would we do that? until Whole Foods came to us and said, well, our customers don't know. You know, apparently every time we go for a certification, we are told that we go above and beyond what is required. But we ended up getting our first certification so that we could prove to our customers that we're doing what we're saying we're doing. Same thing with biodynamic farming. And then with regenerative organic certification, we are certified by the Regenerative Organic Alliance, which was formed by Patagonia and Patagonia Provisions, a company who we deeply respect and who shares our own personal values of essentially creating peace through the world and combating climate change. So that process was actually rather intense. They were also very impressed with the fact that we went above and beyond. And it's not just about how you farm, it's about how you treat your workers, how you treat your employees. You are required to have a living wage, which is defined as living wage for your county, plus 10%, not just for your winery workers, but also for your vineyard workers as well. You're required, they do an audit of your employee handbook to make sure there are certain policies in place. They audit you and ask you questions, and then they'll actually talk to some of your employees, randomly picking them out, to see if you really are doing what you say you're doing. So it's pretty complete and holistic. Again, the idea is to create and embrace and sustain life. So not to take something that's broken and continue it, and that requires every aspect of human beings working together with nature, with the soil. And what ends up making it special for us is that we're able to make wines completely naturally. We use native yeast, we don't add anything to our wines, minimal intervention, and it produces wines that are truly authentic and truly sublime. I've heard people who, there's a regenerative, says he's regenerative organic, doesn't care about certification. Certification is too much. But, you know, I think for us, it's deeply valuable to us. And I think that when consumers see and know that something is certified, they place more trust into it. It's assurance, in a way. So there are people who will get certification just to get it and do the bare minimum. But if you really have the passion for what you do, you really see it in the results. And for me, supporting people that have that passion and have those results is some of the most valuable things you can do on a very, very basic grassroots basis.
Thank you so much. Brooke and Alexey, I'm really curious if you think that a certification would be more appealing to the farmers that you work with, or if that would be a concern, like you said, of, you know, another farmer saying that's too intense, right? Would it be, you know, something to incentivize, or what do you think about that?
I'll maybe kick it off before passing it over. The common theme, I would say, with Violet, with a few things you said, is it comes down to the data, right? And when you were talking about measuring your soil, I love that because you were saying, hey, I'm quantifying these things, right? That, or even capturing the video, right? Hey, here's what actually happened. And really, as we think about helping food producers and their trusted partners make decisions, how do we bring all of that data together to help, to give them those superpowers to be able to do that? So we have our digital platform is called the Operations Center that we've been investing in very heavily over the decades, really. And now there's over 400 million digitized acres. There's over 650,000 connected pieces of equipment. But the reason that it has that traction is because it takes all of that information for a grower to be able to make the best decision for them. And if they need to have documentation or proof and want to share that with somebody, they're able to do that and you know, either in the digital sphere or you know, print a report or whatever may be needed. But that way, again, that data is really there to help you make the best decisions for you. And I think if we extend that to support any type of certification process, that will just make it a lot easier for the growers to be able to do that if they choose to.
Great segue, Alexey, because we talked about the criticality of partnerships. And part of the goal with partnerships is, again, going back to making it farmer-centric and making it as easy as possible for our farmers. And so it's examples like Alexey just gave where we can make that easy when it comes to data collection, when it comes to integrity of records, you know, mapping fields, et cetera. Those are all critical components of a credible regen agriculture program. But one of the partnerships that Cargill has pursued is with John Deere, where connecting their ops center with farmers that already have it and finding ways where the data can be extracted from that into their Regen Connect program profile as well, without them having to manually do it or duplicate it. It creates that connection point to them where 60 to 70% of what they would have to put forward for certification or data requirements, if you will, is already populated. And so we're looking for ways like that and that's what makes the partnership with John Deere so good, is because one, it's easier for the farmers, and we're very aligned on that goal, right? And so it's that kind of thinking, that kind of partnership across industry and government and educational institutions and et cetera, that are really going to have to continue to be cultivated and become mainstream in order for this to really take off from a scalable standpoint.
Thank you so much. I know we're getting close to time, so I want to give you all the chance to give the audience a takeaway from today. But right before we do that, I do want to ask Violet if you can touch on, you mentioned some of the weather impacts that you've had to deal with, and can you just touch on the urgency of this with climate change? Why is this important?
Well, I think more and more people are seeing directly the results of climate change. When people don't see it and they see it on TV, it's not so believable. We have literally seen changes in our own backyard, and we're actually not doing as bad as Europe. I honeymooned in Europe in 2003. Thousands of people died that summer because of the excessive weather. Thank God we were in Norway rather than Croatia, where we would have been otherwise. But I remember the wines from that vintage were extremely flabby, dull, lack of acid, and Europe has been terrified. They've been moving farther and farther north. We're more stable in Napa Valley with our temperature, but on the other hand, we're also seeing those changes. Fires, smoke. Most wineries can't get insurance these days. And the fact that all of these things are happening so rapidly, and we know that this method of farming can sequester carbon in the soil. We are seeing a 1% increase in organic soil matter from last year to this year. We are measuring things, we're seeing the results, we're seeing that our vines are that much more resilient to these weather impacts. The faster things happen, the more things happen in the world that we see on TV every day, the more important it is for us to take action. And we're on a commitment to support peace through agriculture. You cannot have peace without food security, without agriculture. And that's something that we do. We don't do other things, we're farmers. And so if we can promote peace through agriculture, teach as many people, show them the results, and say, you can do this too. My goal is to not just convert wineries and big farmers to this method, but also consumers. How can you do this in your own front and backyards? How can you put simple practices together that can really together make a difference? And the key is working together. We make wine. Wine makes people happy and brings them together. And when you can make people happy and bring them together, you can create global change. And that is absolutely urgent.
Thank you. Oh, yeah. Brooke and Alexey, I also want to give you the chance to give any additional takeaways, but I think that's such a great note to land on as well, and thank you for describing that in again, that manner. Yeah.
I was gonna say, that's a tough statement to follow, yeah. Violet. Like, I felt like very warm and fuzzy after you said that. Just couldn't agree more with Violet, and I sound perhaps a bit like a broken record, but I just cannot underscore enough. If there was one takeaway that I would want this group of visionaries and doers within this space to take away, is that the regenerative agricultural practices that we put into play need to make sense for our farmers. We need to make it easy for them to implement, and we need to make sure that it makes sense for their farm operations, because at the end of the day, this is their livelihood. And if we don't make it right and do it in a way that is easy and makes sense for our farmers, then we don't have, very far to go after that in terms of implementing regenerative agriculture at scale. And so really getting it right at the farm gate and taking a farmer-centric approach across industry, government, educational institutions, NGOs, and consumers is just a very, very important foundational point in order to be successful in this space.
tough act to follow as well, but definitely, I think there's a theme here, right, that we all agree on, which is farmer-centric. It has to work for the grower. And for the audience in the room that's here, right, we all have to work together to make that happen. I mean, our technology can go on competitive types of equipment on non-John Deere brand because that's what our customers have. They have both. We'd love for them to have every piece of equipment be John Deere, but it's just not feasible. So we have to meet them where they're at. We have to do it across supply chain partnerships and across industry and government, across party lines. And as we think about, I would say, the temporal aspect of this, right? This is a very long game. We have to move beyond just the annual crop cycle view and help growers do that as well in terms of the policies that are set up and the stability of that over time. I think is really critical. So I think there's a lot of potential and a lot of work to do still.
Thank you all so much. I really appreciate all of this. Anyone else? Any last comments? Are you going to give us wine now?
No, for those who are lucky enough to go to the laureate ceremony tonight, yes, you will have a chance to try wine.
Awesome.
But
Thank you.
There's applause.
Yeah, there's applause.
Yay! So one little thing I have to say this because I'm a musician and it's very silly, but I like to say the soil is alive with the sound of my crows.
Oh, that was beautiful. Let's give a hand for that. Thank you.
You have to have a bit of levity here. So.
Awesome, yeah. Well,
Thank you, Melina.
Yeah, thank you all so much. I really appreciate it. Thank you guys. I think, should we conclude? Is that, I don't know what we do.
Thank you for having us.
Yeah,
so
thank
much.
you.